But you also have to throw in that Giants game for this reason. The first Giants game. 6 and 7 teams are 6 and 7 teams, and they're not consistent, and they don't show up with their A game every week. So you look at things on paper like this week and say, well, 10 guys on the COVID list, all these injuries, they should beat the Washington football team. Maybe the Eagles are reading that. Oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. Maybe they show up with their C game. They don't play well. That's what 6 and 7 teams tend to do. So you still got to go out there and do it.
All right, let's turn our attention to the Birds. My usual co-host, John McMullen, joins us on the phones right now. JM, are you ready for a walkthrough? Wild walkthrough Wednesday.
I don't know. It's been one of those days, I'm a little bit late. All of a sudden, the Wi-Fi is now. It's one of those days. I'm not, I'm trying to get past this COVID test, this rapid COVID test. That's number one. And we'll see. What number are we at, Jody? Over the last 2 days.
Show number 177, Mr. McMullen.
No, I know 177 shows. Well, I didn't know. You're the official record keeper, but the number of COVID positives over this league over the past 2 days is outrageous.
Was it 75 now, John? I remember we had to do a COVID tracker at CBS yesterday, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot of people. You don't realize it because the news just comes in and out, but I have a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the league and the union handle this because I did text with a couple players. I mentioned to Jody yesterday, a lot of frustration out there with asymptomatic players. And I think there's conversations going on from the union perspective as far as how they want to handle it. And I think the natural inclination, and you see it with the so-called enhanced protocols around the league. There's, I think, 7 teams now where everything is ramped up. And, everybody assumes that. But, if you think about it from a vaccinated, not an unvaccinated standpoint, but a vaccinated standpoint, I've heard from a couple players now, why are we testing asymptomatic people? In other words, you could, that's why you got the vaccine in theory, right? To stop from having the symptoms and the real serious sickness. But, it's in other words, from a flu standpoint, you say a lot of times you might get a bug. You don't even know it and you get through it, especially as a healthy younger person. So that's what I keep hearing from certain NFL players. It's like, why are we getting tested when we're asymptomatic and all of a sudden it's a positive test and they don't even know they're sick until they're told they're sick? And I think that's the way a lot of the players are thinking about this. And I know this is going to create, Jody and I have been through this. People are going to lose their minds over this. But I'm just giving you the player perspective. And there's a lot of frustration around the league when healthy guys are forced to miss games.
All right. And I'll ask this question, even though it's as much to the players as it would be to you, John. So I'm asking you to kind of give me your thoughts on where the players would go if faced with this question. I get the fact that if you're feeling great, you got nothing wrong with you, you feel 100%, you take a test, you're positive, guess what? Oh, you're out. And they're going, whoa, wait a minute, I'm perfectly fine. I understand that mindset. But they do understand that if you've got it, you can pass it on to a teammate. And while most of them are perfectly fine and after being vaccinated can handle it and aren't going to get sick and are asymptomatic, you pass it on to somebody else who doesn't have it yet and maybe isn't as ready to just work through it and be okay with it. There is more to it than just how are you feeling when you take the test. You are worried about the collective team, are you not?
Well, yeah, and the same thing would happen if you think about if it's just a normal flu going through the locker room. You know, a lot of teams try to do different things to try to stop that during a normal week, and obviously this is much more serious on this serious end of the spectrum. But that's where the vaccinated come in. I don't think anybody's complaining about people who've chosen not to get the vaccination. They have to sit out for the 10 days. I from what I've heard from a couple different players now is that's what we were sold the vaccination was for, to protect us from serious illness, serious disease. And if it's doing it, and remember from their standpoint, they're not sick. Right? Like, I'm not talking about people that get sick. They're not sick and they don't know they're sick. And in the case of somebody like Tyler Higbee, who gets a false positive, is forced to sit out on Thursday night, and all of a sudden it's a false positive. I mean, this thing's a mess. But it's sort of like everything else in the NFL. I always, people complain about officiating. I said, what's the point? I always say, Jody, I say, what's the point? You're not turning off the channel. So from a competitive advantage, disadvantage standpoint, they just don't care. They just don't care. They're going to go with the system. And it's more about public relations. It's more about signaling to the public and not getting bad publicity than a sensible policy. And I know the union's getting pushback. It's interesting, though, because the union has been in lockstep with the NFL from a large standpoint when it comes to COVID-19. And a lot of players aren't happy with that.
John, speaking of the COVID-19 situation, there is a team the Eagles are playing on Sunday that's been hit pretty hard by it, and that's the Washington team. They're not. Doesn't look like they'll have Jonathan Allen Sunday. Again, it's only Wednesday, but who knows? Montez Sweat, who knows if he's going to be out? Chase Young's out for the year. This isn't the same team we thought we were going to see, a month ago. Alone at the beginning of the season.
No, they're crippled, and this is a game the Eagles obviously need to win from a standpoint of making it to the playoffs. It would be very, very difficult if they lose this game to make the postseason. If you look at all those prediction sites at 538 New York Times and all those types of things, the projection sites, and that's under a normal standpoint. When you talk about all the stuff that Washington is going through, I think they're at 9 or 10 on the COVID list, as you mentioned, Jeff, and that doesn't even bring up the injuries. The quarterback has a knee injury, an elbow injury. He was forced to leave the game against Dallas. They lost their center, who's their backup center, Tyler Larson, to a torn Achilles. Terry McLaurin's in concussion protocol. I mean, they're an absolute mess. They're on a tee. I mean, if the Eagles don't win this football game, they don't deserve to make the playoffs. And the way, the one player, Montez Sweat, I think he's unvaccinated. So he had to sit out the 10 days. I think he's eligible to come back on Saturday. So there's a chance the Eagles could see him, but he was out before with a fractured jaw, so he hasn't played, and now he hasn't been able to practice. I mean, it looks even on paper. It's not even on paper.
John, let's bring it back to the Eagles. You noted either of the Eagles is going to be a walkthrough. It is a practice, but it's not a full-fledged practice. It's going to be a walkthrough, and this is what it's become over the last month with the Eagles walkthrough Wednesday. They're not pushing their players. They're trying to preserve them for the long run in the 17 games, and I think for the most part, it's worked because the Eagles have not had massive injuries. They, like everybody in the NFL, have some. Nobody gets off injury-free. Who's your favorite guy? Brent Selleck? 100% guaranteed you're going to get injured at some point. I get the point he's trying to make. Are you going to see enough that you're going to know or feel good? When I say feel good, 80, 85% as to who's going to be the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday?
I expect that. I mean, obviously, we'll get a better indication today. Certainly before the bye, it was all indications it was going to be Jalen Hurts. I don't see any reason it's going to be any different after the bye, other than if he tweaked himself working out during the bye week. So we'll get a better indication. Again, with a walkthrough, you're only going to get an estimated practice report. So it's an estimation, but it'll be the same designations as far as didn't practice, limited practice, that type of thing. So you'll get a feel for not only Jalen Hurts but also Jordan Howard. And most notably, and Jason Kelce, which probably is the biggest one.
Right,
To me, we all know Jason's going to try to play.
I was going to say,
I think, but he looked pretty banged up when he left the field against the New York Jets. Now, I've said that before. When he hyperextended his elbow, I said, "All right, well, he's not coming back," and he's back. So he's done this in the past. All indications are he's going to try to play. And with Miles Sanders, he's been dealing with that ankle injury, his own ankle injury, and he probably got a chance to calm it down at least a little bit with the week off. But he's been starting. And I said, with Miles, he's going to play. It's can he finish? Because he's been starting and he's not been able to finish. But, he's going to be out there.
So, John, go ahead, Jody.
The only thing I was going to add to it was, you're going to find out nothing about Kelce today because there's no way he's going to play a walkthrough. No, he's going to be on veteran rest. And like I say, with a lot of these players, you can't judge by what they say. You have to judge it for yourself with your own eyes. There's no way, Kelce, if Kelce tells you that he's guaranteed to play, I don't know that it means he is guaranteed to play. He's a different animal than Jalen Hurts at this point. I think you have to be able to see Jalen with your own two eyes. I don't trust my eyes with Kelce, other than if there's any way, shape, or form Kelce can go, he's going to go on Sunday because he's Jason Kelce, and that's always the way he's been.
Yeah, no question about it. And you're right. He's typically been given Wednesdays off anyway to try to get through the week as a lot of players are. Fletcher Cox as well gets a lot of Wednesdays off at this point of the season, but one thing is, and Jalen kind of mucked this up, Jalen Hurts, because he talked to us. Typically injured players don't talk when there's a chance they're not going to play. And Jalen Hurts, if you remember, talked to us, in advance of the Jets game, and said he was going to play and he was fine, and all of a sudden he wasn't. Whereas if you look at Jason Kelce, who was injured, coming out of the Giants game as well, people forget. Miles Sanders injured, had to leave early. They spoke, they said they were going to play, and they played, and that's typically the way it goes. If media relations is going to give us a player, it means they're going to play. So if Jason talks today, for instance, it gives you a little bit more information. So there are things you can kind of discern just from what's going on. And if he's limited, remember, it's a mental practice, as I said yesterday, more than a physical. And if he's listed as limited, because you're not doing anything anyway, it's an estimation. You can estimate anybody as anything. That's a clear indication he would play. Why we go down there and try to uncover these rocks.
John, regarding the Jason Kelce news, say he misses a game for the first time in 118 games. Do they go with Nate Herbig at center?
Yeah, I would think that would be the most likely way they would go. I've talked to Stout a lot over the years, and he does not like moving parts. So, people have speculated, well, do you take Landon Dickerson and he's settled down now at left guard? Do you move him to center and play, whether it would be, Nate Herbig at left guard because he's a better guard than a center? Well, then you're upsetting two positions, and he doesn't like to do that. Curveball could be Brandon Brooks. That's another one. We have to get some information on him. Nick Sirianni claims there's going to be an update. We'll see later this morning if there's an update. if it's a miracle, I can't imagine he'd play this week. I think the most hopeful Eagles fans would be is if they start his 21-day practice window and try to get him ready for some of these games late in the season. I think that would be a very positive step, and probably the most positive step you could hope for. But if it's a home run, if it's an amazing, hey, he's ready to go, he practiced 3 days, and you put him at right guard, then you have more interesting conversations, and then you might feel a little bit more comfortable moving a Dickerson. But I think that's a real long shot.
Understood, except for our buddy Ed Kratz, who came up short of guaranteeing, but said, don't be surprised if. It's going to be fun to see if he's. You'll get your first information today and see where it plays from there on Brooks. All right, the only guy who's in the protocol for the Eagles is compared to 10 Washington football players right now in the protocol, so that's a major advantage Eagles. But losing Quez Watson is not an advantage Eagles. As you know, John, for a better part of a couple of months now, I've been screaming, why is Jalen Reagor still playing? Well, not only is he going to play, he's going to move up to wide receiver number 2. And Ron Rivera's a pretty smart coach. He's going to know, all right, I need to stop Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith and try and let anybody else beat me who's going to catch the ball for the Eagles. How are they going to replace Quez Watkins if he's not good enough to go? Much like Allen, he could get 2 negative tests between now and Sunday. But if Quez is out of the lineup on Sunday, who's going to get those wide receiver reps?
Jalen Reagor. And I know that's not going to make you happy, Joe. I don't think it's going to make any Eagles fan happy. But, 4:00 every day is going to be every NFL team across the country is crossing their fingers, because that's when the transaction wire starts to be cobbled together and everybody's saying, oh, who's on the COVID list this week, today. And that could change. That could change Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all the way up to the game. You might see somebody being added, taken off the COVID-19 list. And from the Eagles standpoint, no, it's not good. But if you compare it to the other team, you're in good shape. So, 10-1, I'll take 10-1. I'll take the 1. I mean, the Eagles aren't good at receiver. Generally, I mean, their wide receiver, too, Quez Watkins, is one of the weakest second wide receivers in the league. So it's an issue any week. When there's no issues and you're completely healthy, they need to get better at that position at some point, and that's really more of an off-season discussion. But, yeah, they'll have to cobble it together. And whether it's John Hightower, they protected him from the practice squad, so maybe that's a tea leaf that tells you he has an advantage over Deion Kane or somebody like that. Another practice squad receiver, maybe your guy Greg Ward gets another opportunity. Maybe JJ Arcega-Whiteside gets another opportunity, and maybe they do something. I don't think it's that big of a deal, because Quez doesn't offer that much production either. And about the only production he's had over the past month is when Gardner Minshew was in the game, and Gardner Minshew's not going to be in the game. So it's going to be a lot of Devonta Smith and a lot of Dallas Goedert when they do pass the ball. And that's where you got to cross the fingers and hope those guys don't get on the COVID-19 list over the next couple of days.
John, one of the debates I had over the last 24 hours was, and you and I have mentioned this about the Eagles receivers. They just don't have anything right now. So how can you fairly evaluate this quarterback knowing the lack of pass catchers he has outside of Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert?
Well, I think, part of it is, and I hate to compare anyone to superstar quarterbacks, but you've seen guys, most notably Aaron Rodgers, elevate receivers, and obviously we all know Devontae Adams, but if you look at Scantling, Equin, how do you say his name? Equinemius St. Brown. Yeah. If you look at his other receivers, They ain't good. And Alan Lazard, but they make plays occasionally because the quarterback elevates the talent around him. Now, again, it's not fair to compare any quarterback, or certainly very few quarterbacks to Aaron Rodgers. But you saw it in a much, much lesser degree against the New York Jets. And as Jody will point out, we have to put that caveat on there. It's the Jets. So I'm saying that. But Gardner Minshew got to start because of the injury. And all of a sudden, we just talked about Quez Watkins was back involved. Not to a great degree. It wasn't spectacular by any stretch of the imagination, but it was 3 catches and 3 targets, and he contributed a little bit something to the win, which he had not been doing. So from my standpoint, that alone gives you some information about evaluating the quarterback. It's Jonathan Gannon likes to talk about defense. He always says it's cover and rush and coverage. Always says it, constantly says it. It's coupled. Yes, I mean, it hurts the quarterback when the receivers aren't top tier, and I think that's pretty obvious to everyone. But the quarterback can elevate receivers as well, and we see it all the time in this league. And we haven't seen that from Jalen Hurts, and that's not the strength of his game, and that's right now, and that's not to say he can't evolve and he can't get better. But that alone, the fact that he hasn't been able to get the lesser receivers in the game, it gives you some information. It does give you some information when it comes to an evaluation standpoint.
All right, John, one more replace Quez Watkins question, and we'll move on to other things. Quez gets 50 some odd snaps every single year. You average, go back. Some games Eagles have more snaps, some get to have left. But let's use 50 as a nice round number that Quez was potentially going to take this week if he didn't have COVID, and he may yet take it. This might be a conversation that we're having that turns out to be moot. But assuming he doesn't come back and clear protocols before Sunday's game. Of those 50 snaps, if I told you 25 of them are going to be Eagles in 2 tight end sets, knowing full well that's not their preference, but you have to put somebody on the field. And if you don't have confidence in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside or Greg Ward or Hightower coming up from the practice squad, maybe it's just best to go 2 tight end. When we question how many snaps Rager got, the fact that Rager got more snaps than Devonta Smith, the answer was, well, we're in 12 and 13 formation, so we had no issues, no problems putting those guys out there. In other words, they can block better than Devonta, and we don't want to risk Devonta hurt getting hurt blocking. Do you think we see a lot of multi-tight end sets out of the Eagles on Sunday?
If they're winning, and I expect them to be winning, I think it's going. You look at the 2 games, right? Detroit, the blowout in Detroit, and the game against the Jets specifically, where they just ran the football the entire second half. I mean, the entire second half. And obviously in Detroit, they should have. With the Jets, again, it's the Jets. It didn't look as big as a blowout on the scoreboard, but it wasn't close. We all know. We all saw it wasn't let on. And you said better blocker. They don't think he's a better blocker. It's more about injury and the fact, in other words, if they wanted to pass out of 13 or they wanted to pass out of 12, Devonta Smith would be on the field. But they didn't want to pass. So, as I kind of said, and they're not going to say it, but they winked it behind the scenes. If you're in 13 and you're going to run the ball, why are you going to put the 166-pound kid to set the edge? It doesn't make any sense. And honestly, I'm on board 100% with the coaching staff. Makes no sense whatsoever. You don't know what can happen there, Jody. He can get rolled up. Some silly injury. You're protecting Devonta Smith. And I know a lot of people got upset because Rager had more snaps. And that was just really you hear it a lot from coaches how the game went. That was really how the game went. If they needed to throw the football, obviously Devontae Smith is going to go out there. And even if it's a close game and they're more balanced and they're just trying to win the game, Devontae Smith is going to be out there. The only reason he was out there is because of the situation and the understanding that we're just going to run the ball, let him set the edge. You know, you hate to say it, but I've used that term, crash test dummy. That's what you want to out. I mean,
I knew you were where you're going, J-Mac.
It doesn't matter. Football's a hard sport, man. And when you put it in those terms, people hate it, but that's the reality of the situation. One guy you can be without, and it's not a concern. Another guy you can't be without. John,
I keep looking at the Eagles' schedule. I think 9 wins will be enough to get them in, especially if they win these next 3 games. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on their path to the playoffs, and do you think 9 wins will be good enough to get that 7th seed?
I think the 7 seed is going to have 9 wins. So it comes down, obviously, tiebreakers. You have this log jam and really 5 different teams. Now, the Eagles are in very good shape because they beat Atlanta, they beat New Orleans, and they play Washington twice. So they can take care of their business against one of the other 6 and 7 teams, which leaves Minnesota. And Minnesota still has Green Bay and the LA Rams on their schedule. So, you know, you really don't have to worry about them either. So if the Eagles handle their business, and by handle their business, I mean beat a crippled Washington team, beat a disaster of a New York Giants team, which is even more of a disaster the last time they disappointed against them, and then beat Washington again, yeah, I think they're going to be in the playoffs, even no matter what happens in Week 18. If Dallas has to play, if Dallas doesn't have to play, if Dallas has to play, they're going to lose that game. If they don't have to play, they're probably going to win it. And, you know, Jody had asked last week, is it more likely the Eagles go 4-0 down the stretch or 0-4? I think there's no chance they go 0-4. I think there's a very small chance they go 4-0. But you also have to throw in that Giants game for this reason. The first Giants game. 6 and 7 teams are 6 and 7 teams, and they're not consistent, and they don't show up with their A game every week. So you look at things on paper like this week and say, well, 10 guys on the COVID list, all these injuries, they should beat the Washington football team. You know, maybe the Eagles are reading that. Oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. Maybe they show up with their C game. They don't play well. That's what 6 and 7 teams tend to do. So you still got to go out there and do it. But, you know, right now, Washington is that 7th seed. But if you go to these sites, 538, New York Times, the prediction sites, they all have the Eagles having the biggest chance to make the playoffs at this point because of what I just explained about the schedule, basically.
And it's going to be on Coach Nick Sirianni to make sure they don't read the press clippings and they don't come in and go, yeah, we just got to take care of our business and yeah, we're in good shape and yeah, we don't have to be pressurized and like, no, you want them to feel a little bit of pressure. And that's the coach's job, is to make sure they're in the correct mindset and prepped correctly for the game. We'll see how Sirianni does that because as a first-year coach, he hasn't faced something like this just yet. I want to run this by both of you two guys. Really interesting point made by your friend, our friend. I'm sure everybody recognizes the name, Kevin Cooney, longtime writer here in town, sports writer, who jumped on my WIP show last night. We were talking about the quarterback, and he said everybody's got an opinion. He already has enough information to say he'd prefer not to go forward with Jalen Hurts as their starting quarterback next year. I'm still more open-minded than that. Others have decided he's not the guy going forward. And all right, Kevin, then where are you going if not Jalen Hurts? I'll give you guys a hypothetical. You know my favorite, John. You're not getting Russell Wilson. He's staying in Seattle or ends up somewhere else. not getting Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a really foregone conclusion. And Deshaun Watson's lawsuits have not been settled, and the Eagles aren't ready to take him on. If there's a possibility he could end up in jail as soon as he puts on his Eagle uniform. So those three guys are out. If I told you your other choices are stay with Jalen Hurts, take a quarterback in the draft. The Eagles' picks have faltered a little bit because they keep winning. Miami keeps winning. The Colts right now are a playoff team, so that pick would be in the 20s. 3 picks are 3 picks, and you have the ability to use them and couple them and move up and down, but they're not as high up as they were a couple of weeks ago. Let's say by the time your first pick comes up, you're going to get the second quarterback off the board. One of the two top ones has come off, either Corral or Pickens. Someone's going to come off the board. But you can, if you want, you can take the second best quarterback in the college draft. Or I give you another option. What would you think about Derek Carr being traded to the Eagles? He's got 1 year left on his deal. It's a now reasonable $19 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but that's almost cheap for a quarterback. It's the last year of his deal, which means you can bring him in, you can try and re-sign him, or you can bring him in and say, go out and go nuts, Derek, and then we'll talk to you afterwards. But you could end up just renting him for a year if he has a big year and he decides he wants to go play somewhere else, West Coast guy, blah, blah, blah. What would you think about the Eagles trading for Derek Carr going into 2022? John, you first.
Well, yeah, I kind of saw that. I don't know where it manifested from. I don't know why the Raiders. Remember, John Gruden's out. John Gruden was at the precipice of a lot of that. Are the Raiders going to move on from Derek Carr because John Gruden falls in love and out of love with quarterbacks as quick as anybody in human history. So he's always looking for the bigger and better deal, so to speak. Now that he's gone, and who knows who the coach is going to be. Look, I think Jalen Hurts boils down to a simple thing, and I wrote about this. It'll be in Philly Mag today. The Eagles will try to improve at the quarterback position in the offseason. If they can, they will. If they can't, they won't. So I think everybody's been focused on this 1 year. We got to give Jalen Hurts 1 year. He's got 1 year. The Eagles got to make a decision. No, they don't. They could kick the can down the road. They could play him again for another year. That's probably the most likely scenario at this point. As far as picking guys up, look, if Deshaun Watson revisits his no trade clause, puts Philadelphia on the list, I think they would trade for Deshaun Watson. I know they would trade for Russell Wilson. He's their white whale. We talked about that. Again, he would have to put the Eagles and waive his no trade clause and put them in the conversation. I agree with you with Aaron Rodgers. And then the evaluation standpoint in the draft, it is all about, do they like Kenny Pickett? They got 3 first-round picks. Go up and get him. Do they like Matt Corral? You got 3 first-round picks. Go up and get them. Wherever you got to go up and get. That all depends on what they think of the particular player. And if they don't, if they evaluate them negatively and say, not necessarily negatively, but you get my point. Well, we don't know if this guy's going to be a star. Then you just kick the can down the road. And I really think it's that simple for the Eagles. If they can improve at the position, and Derek Carr's, I got off on a tangent. Sorry, Jody. Yeah, he'd be a guy that you can improve at the position. I have no idea why the Raiders would want to get rid of that guy at this point. Because
I'll give you the line of thinking. Rebuild. They've reached a point. They took the shot with Gruden, didn't work out. All the things around it that tie into it. Maybe they move away from Mike Mayock as their general managers as well. They say we got to tear it down, and when we say tear it down, we mean almost to the studs to build it back up again. They just say this Raider era, Gruden, Carr, Mayock, whatever is over. We got to start from scratch. That would be the reason that they would trade Derek Carr.
Yeah, well, number one, you don't have to do that in the NFL. You could rebuild on the fly. I think he's 30 years old, so he's got a number of good years in front of him. And at one time, the highest paid player in football, as you noted, Jody. Now he's a bargain on top of it from the standpoint of what you typically have to pay veteran quarterbacks in this league. So I think, the outlier was Gruden always when it came to Derek Carr and the Raiders, and whomever they bring in at GM, if they fire Mike Mayock, whoever they hire to be head coach is going to be more sensible about the quarterback and say, you know what, our quarterback is pretty good. He's in the conversation. You always want the superstar, always, but there's only a finite number of them, and I certainly don't put Derek Carr in that category. But I put him in the category that I always use. My quarterback is probably better than your quarterback, and Derek Carr's in that category. If I'm a Raiders fan, he's better than more quarterbacks in this league and so the contextual aspect of it is he's pretty good. And I don't think they would want to go in that direction.
This is how
Jeff, if you could just follow up. How do you rate Carr? If you could acquire Carr for a reasonable deal package, would you want to extend him? Would you want to give him $30+ million per year and put 4 more years on the back end of the deal? Do you think Carr's that kind of quarterback that you would look to do if you were the Eagles?
It is an interesting question. I would say yes. One, you're making the head coach happy. He can run the offense he wants to run. I think people hear that number 30 million. They go, oh, well, the salary cap's going up. It's going to really spike in 2023. That's not going to be an outrageous number. He's a good player. And remember what you're doing if you draft. You understand, even with Jalen Hurts, as you're going through it as the evolution, this is a years-long process. It would be a years-long process if you drafted Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral or anybody in 2023 as well. Young quarterbacks take time. And that's why you look at proven quarterbacks and the Deshaun Watsons. Again, this is, I always have to put the condition on it because if people don't hear the condition, Jody, obviously if the legal implications get cleaned up to the point where you can move forward, Russell Wilson, these are proven commodities. Derek Carr is a proven commodity, not to the talent level of those players, but you could win a lot of football games if you put the right pieces around Derek Carr.
The year Derek Carr had an actual good offensive line, the Raiders won 12 games. Let's put Derek Carr behind the Eagles' offensive line with that running game and with an innovative offense to give him a little bit more receivers. And again, maybe Quez Watkins and guys like that are better, but I'm going to assume the Eagles get more weapons on the outside for him. I think Devonta Smith becomes, pretty much a Pro Bowler at the very least with a Derek Carr.
The Devonta Smith's numbers would just spike to a ludicrous. He's one of those high volume passers I talk about, Jody. I mean, if he's out there, I obviously don't have his numbers in front of me, but I got to believe he's near 4,000 over the past 5 or 6 years. I mean, he's consistent throwing the football, good, bad, and different talent around him. He can get the football to his receivers and his playmakers, and that's what Nick Sirianni wants as well. So you have to put that in the equation.
Derek Carr's numbers have been getting better every year. This year, notwithstanding, because he's trying to do too much. But I think from 2017 to 2019, he was one of the few quarterbacks with 20 plus touchdowns and fewer than 10 interceptions. Or obviously, this year he has double-digit picks, but he doesn't have a good offensive line. He's trying to do too much. When he plays bad, that team just gets blown out. When he plays well, as we saw against the Eagles, the Raiders win games. It's either Derek Carr or bust for that team right now.
Yeah, Derek Carr, 3 consecutive years of over 4,000 yards passing. There's only a handful of passers in the league that can make that claim that the last 3 years in a row they've been over 4,000 yards. So, John, as you describe him, volume passer, yeah, that's what Derek Carr is. I'd not even considered Derek Carr, and there's a lot of hurdles to get over. You're right. I don't know that the Raiders would want to deal him. It's got to be a specialized directional decision that the organization makes. We're taking it down to build it back up again. Otherwise, they're just going to keep Derek Carr, and they're going to be the ones who give him the extension. But I had not considered him as an Eagle possibility for quarterback, and it's intriguing. I doubt it's going to happen, but it is intriguing. All right, JM, we hope you pass the COVID test. All you guys got to get down there and take that test. I think I hope it's good for all of you guys. Do you think the Eagles try and keep the amount of time that they let you into the quote-unquote walkthrough even more limited than usual? What's it going to be like down there at the NovaCare complex today?
Well, because of the bye week, we have rapid tests. We have to sit around and wait for. They generally take about 30 or 60 minutes to come in. So you got to wait.
Who do you sit next to during that 30 minutes?
Well,
does it have to be Kratz because you're tied at the hip him, or
you're not awesome on it. You're either in your car or we generally mill out in the open air. We just all sit there and wait for the text that says we passed or we're a leper, one or the other.
Well, what if one's a leper? Then don't you all have to go get tested again?
Yeah, good point. No, we don't, Jeff. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that's another story for another day. Well, again, it's all for show. I hate to say
have a good day today, whatever that result happens to be. I'll see you back here tomorrow, brother. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
John McMullen, usual co-host of the show here with us on Birds 365, who, yes, got to get a little thing up his nose today. He does it every single week. He is a diehard Eagles beat reporter, and we're glad that he's here with us every day on Birds 365. I'm glad Jeff Kerr's with me today. Got a bunch of things to get into, Eagles versus the Washington football team, but a couple league-wide issues as well. Next hour on the show, we're going to have Eric Edholm from Yahoo Sports. He's a national football writer, covers the entire league. We'll get his thoughts on the Eagles, but also one of Yahoo's top draft guys. So we just talked about Derek Carr. We'll get his take on how this year's quarterback draft compares to everybody else. And Eagles with 3 first-round draft picks can fill some holes this year if they don't have to go to the quarterback position. So Eric Edholm a little bit later will hop aboard with us in hour number 2. But right now, glad to have Jeff Kerr with me, Jody McDonald, here on Birds 365.